AI-driven investment fraud has grown faster than most people expected. The speed of automation allows scams to appear credible within hours. Regulators operate on slower cycles built for earlier threats. That gap creates opportunity for fraud to scale quietly. Modern scams no longer rely on obvious deception or crude messaging. They use polished language, realistic visuals, and calm authority. Familiar cues lower skepticism. Trust is manipulated before doubt has time to form. Regulatory systems were designed for human-paced misconduct. Investigations assume time to observe, document, and respond. AI compresses those timelines dramatically. By the time action begins, the damage is often complete. Jurisdictional boundaries further slow enforcement efforts. Fraud crosses borders instantly through digital platforms. Regulators remain constrained by geography and legal process. Speed favors offenders, not institutions. AI tools allow scams to adapt continuously. Messages change in response to user behavior. Static rules fail against dynamic systems. Adaptation overwhelms traditional compliance frameworks. Enforcement agencies rely heavily on historical patterns. AI generates new variations that resemble legitimate activity. Pattern recognition becomes unreliable. False confidence delays intervention. Victims often struggle to identify manipulation early. AI-generated advice sounds measured and professional. Emotional triggers are subtle rather than aggressive. Subtlety increases success rates. Platform moderation systems face similar challenges. Automated filters lag behind generative tools. Each update reacts to past abuse. Fraud evolves faster than safeguards. Public awareness has not caught up with technological realism. Many people still associate scams with obvious red flags. AI removes those signals. Familiarity becomes the trap. The result is a widening gap between threat and response. Technology accelerates offense, while defense moves incrementally. Incremental change cannot match exponential tools. That imbalance defines the current risk environment. Regulators face structural limits that technology easily bypasses. Rulemaking requires consultation, debate, and approval. Each step takes time and consensus. AI exploits those delays by iterating faster than policy can respond. AI lowers the cost of fraud to near zero. Scripts, voices, and faces can be generated instantly. Low cost encourages experimentation at scale. Failed attempts are discarded without consequence. Fraud networks now test thousands of variations simultaneously. Engagement data guides rapid refinement. Successful versions spread while others disappear. This feedback loop accelerates effectiveness beyond manual methods. Enforcement relies on complaints and reports to trigger action. Many victims realize harm only after losses occur. Delayed reporting slows detection further. Early signals are often missed. Evidence gathering becomes harder with synthetic media. Audio, video, and documents appear authentic. Verification requires technical expertise and time. Time advantages remain with perpetrators. Legal definitions struggle to keep pace with generative techniques. Existing statutes target known behaviors. AI blurs lines between advice, promotion, and manipulation. Ambiguity complicates prosecution. Cross-platform coordination is limited and inconsistent. Fraudsters move between channels seamlessly. Takedowns on one platform push activity elsewhere. Fragmentation weakens collective defense. Resource constraints limit proactive monitoring. Skilled analysts are scarce and expensive. AI attackers scale without comparable cost. Asymmetry widens with each advance. Public trust in authoritative signals becomes a vulnerability. Professional tone and familiar faces reduce suspicion. AI leverages credibility without accountability. Trust is repurposed as a weapon. Regulatory response remains reactive by design. Reaction follows harm rather than prevention. Prevention requires anticipation and agility. Agility is difficult within rigid institutional frameworks. Detection models depend on labeled data from past incidents. AI fraud constantly invents new forms. Training data becomes outdated quickly. Gaps appear before systems can be retrained. Compliance teams face alert fatigue from excessive false positives. AI mimics legitimate behavior convincingly. Filtering noise consumes limited resources. Real threats blend into ordinary activity. Financial platforms prioritize user growth and engagement. Security improvements risk friction and reduced usage. Trade-offs slow protective changes. Fraud benefits from delayed platform responses. Synthetic identities complicate attribution and accountability. Fake profiles persist across multiple services. Removal becomes temporary rather than permanent. Persistence enables repeated targeting. Language localization expands fraud into new regions rapidly. AI translates nuance and cultural cues. Local regulators lack preparedness. Global reach overwhelms regional oversight. Voice cloning increases emotional impact of scams. Familiar voices bypass rational scrutiny. Emotional trust accelerates compliance. Losses occur before suspicion emerges. Deepfake endorsements undermine traditional warning signs. Visual proof once implied legitimacy. AI erodes that assumption. Verification becomes a specialized skill. Regulators depend on cooperation from private companies. Cooperation varies by incentive and jurisdiction. Delays weaken enforcement outcomes. Coordination struggles against fast-moving threats. Legal remedies often arrive after funds disappear. Recovery processes are slow and uncertain. Deterrence weakens without restitution. Repeat offenders exploit low consequences. The ecosystem rewards speed, not accuracy. AI optimizes persuasion through rapid iteration. Oversight values certainty and due process. Mismatched priorities create persistent exposure. Regulatory frameworks depend on clear intent and attribution to assign responsibility. AI systems obscure authorship through automation and proxies. Intent becomes difficult to prove conclusively. Ambiguity slows enforcement and weakens deterrence. Fraudsters exploit the gray space between marketing and advice. Language is carefully framed to avoid explicit promises. Plausible deniability complicates legal thresholds. Subtle wording delays intervention. Supervisory audits are periodic, not continuous. AI-driven campaigns operate nonstop across time zones. Gaps between audits create windows of opportunity. Continuous abuse thrives in those gaps. Whistleblowing mechanisms are poorly suited to synthetic operations. Victims often lack concrete proof beyond screenshots. Screenshots no longer establish authenticity. Weak evidence stalls escalation. Training regulators to recognize AI artifacts takes time. Tools and tactics evolve rapidly. Skills lag behind current techniques. Knowledge gaps persist despite best efforts. Budget cycles constrain rapid procurement of defensive technology. Approval processes extend timelines. Meanwhile, attackers upgrade freely. Financial inertia favors offense. Public advisories struggle to stay specific without causing panic. Vague warnings reduce effectiveness. Specific warnings age quickly. Communication lags reduce protective value. Courts require high evidentiary standards to act. AI-generated content muddies provenance. Expert testimony becomes necessary and slow. Legal rigor conflicts with urgent response. International cooperation depends on treaties and trust. Negotiations move slowly. Fraud crosses borders instantly. Speed mismatches erode coordinated action. The cumulative effect is systemic lag. Each safeguard advances incrementally. AI fraud compounds exponentially. The gap widens with every iteration. Regulatory responses often focus on past crises rather than emerging ones. Lessons are drawn from previous failures. AI-driven fraud represents a different category of risk. Old solutions struggle against new dynamics. Fraudsters benefit from asymmetry in accountability. Failed scams disappear without consequence. Successful scams extract value quickly. Low downside encourages constant experimentation and escalation. Investor education campaigns lag behind technological realism. Warnings describe outdated scam patterns. AI removes obvious warning signs. Education struggles to match evolving tactics. AI-generated personas exploit authority bias effectively. Professional appearance signals safety subconsciously. Rational evaluation weakens under familiarity. Manipulation occurs before skepticism activates. Detection relies heavily on transaction monitoring. Fraud increasingly happens before transactions occur. Persuasion, not execution, becomes the core weapon. Monitoring systems miss early-stage influence. Regulators must balance innovation with consumer protection. Overregulation risks stifling legitimate development. Underregulation invites abuse. That balance slows decisive action. Platforms often prioritize scale over scrutiny. Rapid onboarding reduces friction. Reduced friction lowers verification standards. Weak entry controls enable fraudulent actors. Legal penalties rarely scale with technological leverage. AI amplifies impact without increasing personal risk. Punishment remains static. Deterrence weakens as scale increases. Public trust erosion becomes a secondary consequence. Repeated fraud incidents reduce confidence broadly. Legitimate markets suffer collateral damage. Trust recovery takes longer than prevention. The system reacts to symptoms rather than causes. Enforcement targets individual cases. Structural incentives remain unchanged. Without reform, repetition continues. Regulatory culture values certainty and procedural fairness over speed. Decisions require verification, review, and documentation. AI fraud exploits delays inherent in careful processes. Speed advantages compound. While institutions deliberate, fraud prevention depends on collaboration across agencies and sectors. Coordination introduces communication overhead and delays. AI actors operate without coordination costs. Independence accelerates malicious adaptation. Many enforcement tools assume centralized control points. Decentralized platforms remove clear choke points. Intervention becomes fragmented and reactive. Fragmentation favors persistent abuse. AI enables personalization at scale, increasing persuasive power. Messages adapt to individual fears and goals. Personal relevance lowers resistance. Manipulation becomes harder to detect collectively. Regulatory staffing models struggle to attract technical talent. Compensation and bureaucracy limit recruitment. Expertise gaps slow investigation quality. Attackers exploit those gaps relentlessly. Public reporting mechanisms rely on awareness and initiative. Many victims feel shame or confusion. Underreporting hides true scale. Hidden scale delays prioritization. Evidence chains break down when content is synthetic. Originals may never exist. Attribution becomes probabilistic rather than definitive. Legal thresholds resist probabilistic proof. Regulatory sandboxes test innovation, not abuse. Malicious use cases evade early scrutiny. Abuse emerges post-deployment. Post-deployment response is slower and riskier. AI fraud benefits from constant experimentation without learning costs. Models reuse insights instantly. Institutions relearn slowly. Knowledge asymmetry grows over time. The mismatch is structural, not temporary. Incremental fixes cannot reverse acceleration. Systemic redesign is required. Without it, lag persists. Traditional enforcement assumes identifiable bad actors behind each scheme. AI allows responsibility to be diffused across tools, accounts, and intermediaries. Diffusion blurs accountability. Blurred accountability weakens deterrence and delays decisive action. Fraud now exploits trust in technology itself, not just institutions. Many people assume advanced systems are regulated by default. That assumption lowers skepticism. Lower skepticism increases exposure to manipulation. Regulatory warnings struggle to remain credible without constant updates. Frequent alerts risk desensitizing the public. Infrequent alerts become outdated quickly. Timing challenges reduce protective impact. AI-generated investment narratives often mirror legitimate educational content. Similar tone and structure confuse detection systems. Confusion delays response. Delays allow influence to spread unchecked. Enforcement relies on post-event analysis to refine future defenses. AI fraud adapts in real time. Real-time adaptation defeats retrospective learning. Learning cycles fall behind live threats. Platform incentives favor rapid content creation and distribution. Moderation competes with growth objectives. Growth usually wins in ambiguous cases. Ambiguity benefits fraudsters. Regulatory authority is fragmented across financial, technological, and consumer domains. Fragmentation creates jurisdictional uncertainty. Uncertainty slows action. Unified threats exploit divided oversight. AI lowers the skill threshold required to conduct sophisticated scams. Non-experts gain advanced persuasive capabilities. Scale expands rapidly. Expansion overwhelms limited enforcement capacity. Public understanding of AI limitations remains incomplete. Many assume realism equals accuracy. That assumption is exploited. Exploitation erodes trust quietly. The challenge is no longer isolated fraud cases. It is a systemic mismatch between speed and control. Control mechanisms evolve slowly. Speed defines the threat landscape. Regulators increasingly depend on technology vendors for detection tools. Vendor tools follow commercial incentives and update cycles. Those cycles lag fast-moving abuse. Dependence limits independent defensive innovation. AI fraud exploits moments of market stress and uncertainty. Volatility heightens emotional vulnerability. Emotional states reduce analytical scrutiny. Timing amplifies manipulation effectiveness. Disclosure requirements struggle with synthetic persuasion. Disclosures assume human authorship and intent. AI-generated narratives dilute responsibility. Dilution weakens enforcement leverage. Warning labels lose effectiveness when overused or ignored. Constant alerts become background noise. Noise reduces attention. Reduced attention benefits deceptive messaging. Financial literacy initiatives assume rational decision-making. AI targets emotional and psychological shortcuts instead. Education alone proves insufficient. Manipulation bypasses knowledge safeguards. Regulators face political pressure to avoid overreach. Overreach risks backlash and innovation slowdown. Caution delays decisive intervention. Delay extends harm. Data privacy rules limit proactive monitoring. Surveillance concerns restrict information sharing. Restrictions slow detection. Attackers operate unconstrained. Enforcement success metrics focus on cases closed, not harm prevented. Prevention is difficult to measure. Measurement bias favors reaction. Reaction arrives after losses occur. AI fraud evolves through experimentation rather than planning. Continuous testing refines persuasion rapidly. Rapid refinement defeats static controls. Controls remain perpetually outdated. The landscape demands adaptive governance, not static rules. Static systems fail against dynamic threats. Adaptation requires structural change. Without change, lag continues. The core challenge lies in how quickly trust can now be manufactured. AI produces authority, familiarity, and confidence on demand. These signals once took years to earn. Instant credibility collapses traditional warning systems. Regulatory power depends on visibility and traceability. AI obscures both through scale and automation. Visibility disappears before response begins. Response without visibility becomes ineffective. Fraud prevention increasingly requires anticipation rather than reaction. Anticipation demands flexible rules and adaptive tools. Rigid frameworks resist change. Resistance leaves gaps unprotected. Public skepticism alone cannot solve the problem. Skepticism requires constant vigilance. Vigilance is exhausting and uneven. Fatigue creates openings for manipulation. Institutions must rethink how protection is designed. Protection cannot rely solely on enforcement after harm. Early friction and verification matter more. Design choices influence exposure. Technology accelerates influence faster than governance can evolve. Influence spreads silently through trusted channels. Silent spread delays alarms. Delayed alarms increase impact. The gap between innovation and oversight is not temporary. It reflects fundamentally different speeds of change. One side compounds exponentially, the other advances incrementally. Addressing the imbalance requires humility about limits. No single rule or tool will suffice. Adaptation must be continuous. Continuity replaces one-time solutions. Until systems evolve structurally, responsibility shifts downward. Individuals must navigate environments with fewer reliable signals. Caution becomes necessary, not optional. Awareness reduces vulnerability. The future of financial safety depends on restraint and patience. Speed favors deception in the current landscape. Calm judgment remains the strongest defense. Long-term protection begins with understanding these limits.